The sharp sound of silk ripping echoed through the luxurious hotel lobby in Aspen, just as I approached the Jones family table. I am Aubrey Jones, a 26-year-old digital strategist who has spent the last 6 months operating entirely from the shadows to build an empire that others now claim as their own. My sister Harper stood before me with a malicious smirk, while her diamond-encrusted fingers still clutched the ruined fabric of my custom-made gown. The elite guests fell into a heavy silence as they witnessed this sudden act of violence, but Harper only leaned in to whisper that I had absolutely nothing left to lose in this world. Instead of reacting with tears or physical anger, I calmly pulled my tablet from my bag and opened the administrative interface for the entire event's projection system. Since I was the one who personally configured every technical aspect of this gala, I possess the unique digital keys that my technologically illiterate family could never hope to understand. I deliberately pressed the standby command, which caused the massive LED screen surrounding the ballroom to flicker with an ominous and distorted signal. Harper tilted her head in confusion as she looked at my glowing screen before mockingly repeating that I was powerless against her status. I met her gaze with a chilling composure and asked her if she was truly certain about that statement before my thumb hovered over the final activation sequence. What do you think I am about to reveal on those massive screens to make Harper regret her arrogance forever? Make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave your predictions in the comments section below, because the real drama is just beginning. 6 months ago, Harper begged me to help her build an image of a successful tech entrepreneur to deceive the prestigious Sterling family. My sister had spent years jumping from one failed project to another before finally realizing that she possessed neither the patience nor the technical skill to succeed in the digital world. I clearly remember the evening she sat in our living room while desperately explaining how her future marriage depended entirely on her maintaining an elite social status. My mother, Rosemary Jones, sat beside her and placed a heavy hand on my shoulder while insisting that it was my duty to support my sister's happiness at any cost. Since our family had struggled financially for years, Mom believed that Harper's entry into the high society of the Sterling family was our only ticket to a better life. I eventually agreed to the arrangement, but I never anticipated that I would end up working 18 hours every single day just to maintain a lie. My life became a constant cycle of writing complex scripts, designing branding assets, and managing intricate server systems, while Harper attended gala dinners in my place. Because Harper had no understanding of the technical infrastructure I built, she became 100% dependent on my labor to keep her public persona alive. I watched from the shadows as she posted the content I created and received thousands of glowing comments from people who believed she was a visionary genius. During this time, I was also introduced to Desmond Sterling, who was the wealthy heir to a massive hotel empire and Harper's unsuspecting fiancé. Desmond was deeply attracted to the intellectual depth and the digital innovation he saw in the projects that I had secretly developed in my cramped office. Whenever Desmond visited our home to discuss business, Mom would force me to stay in the basement so that I wouldn't accidentally reveal the truth about who was actually doing the work. Rosemary constantly warned me that any slip of the tongue would ruin the Jones family's reputation and destroy Harper's chance at a royal wedding. As the months passed, Harper's arrogance grew significantly because she started to believe her own lies and convinced herself that she actually earned her fame. She began treating me like a disposable employee rather than her younger sister by demanding more work while offering less appreciation in return. My sister often made mocking comments about my lack of social life without acknowledging that my sacrifice was the only thing funding her expensive lifestyle in Aspen. The tension within our household reached a breaking point when I discovered that Harper was secretly interviewing external marketing agencies to replace me after her wedding. I accidentally saw an email on her laptop where she described me as an unstable relative who was becoming too difficult to manage behind the scenes. She planned to discard me the moment she officially secured the sterling fortune, because she didn't want a permanent witness to her fraudulent past living in her new mansion. I felt a cold realization wash over me as I realized that my own mother and sister were plotting to erase my contributions entirely once I was no longer useful. Instead of confronting them immediately, I decided to continue my work while quietly implementing hidden protocols within the very systems Harper thought she controlled. Every strategic plan and video file I uploaded from that moment on contained an invisible digital footprint that linked the work directly to my personal identity. I knew that Harper would never bother to check the metadata of the files because she was too busy selecting expensive jewelry for her upcoming birthday celebration. While my family was dreaming of a life filled with luxury and power, I was carefully documenting every instance of their exploitation and greed. I began to see that my loyalty was being met with pure betrayal, which meant I had to prepare myself for a future where I stood alone against their lies. The legacy of deceit that Harper and Rosemary were building was massive, but it was constructed on a foundation of my intellectual property that I could withdraw at any second. 2 weeks before the gala, I received a balance notification from a secondary account that Harper had forgotten to change the password for. My heart sank as I stared at the digital statement showing a massive transfer of $15,000 from a project I had personally completed. This money was supposed to be my performance bonus for securing a high-value contract with a tech firm in New York. Instead of reaching my savings, the funds had been diverted into an account Harper used solely for her designer shopping sprees. I spent the next hour gathering every digital receipt and bank log to prove that my sister had forged my signature on the authorization documents. My hands were shaking from a mixture of cold fury and profound disappointment as I realized my own family was treating my hard-earned income as their personal slush fund. I marched into the kitchen where Mom was helping Harper organize her jewelry collection for the upcoming birthday celebration in Aspen. When I showed them the evidence of the stolen $15,000, Rosemary didn't even look surprised or ashamed of what had transpired. My mother simply looked at me with a tired expression and told me to consider the money as a wedding gift for my sister. She explained that Harper needed to maintain a certain lifestyle to impress the Sterling family and ensure the marriage contract remained secure. I couldn't believe my ears as Mom prioritized Harper's fraudulent social image over my basic financial security and professional dignity. My mother's cold dismissal felt like a final betrayal that effectively severed any remaining loyalty I felt toward the Jones household. "Do you honestly want me to stay silent after she stole $15,000 of my money, Mom?" I asked, while looking directly into her eyes for any sign of remorse. Rosemary just sighed and turned back to the jewelry, while telling me that family members should always be willing to sacrifice for the greater good. Harper sat there with a smug expression and even dared to suggest that I was being incredibly greedy for demanding my own pay. I realized then that talking to them was a complete waste of time because they no longer viewed me as a person with rights. I walked back to my room and began inserting encrypted evidence files and hidden email logs deep into the projection system of the party. Harper remained completely oblivious to my activities because she lacked the technical knowledge to ever inspect the underlying data structures of her presentations. During a dinner later that evening, Desmond began asking Harper several complex questions regarding the technical terms used in her recent business reports. I watched with silent satisfaction as Harper struggled to provide even a basic explanation for the strategies that I had originally designed. My sister attempted to laugh off her ignorance by claiming she was too focused on the wedding preparations to remember the specific digital metrics. Desmond seemed increasingly puzzled by her lack of professional expertise, despite her being the supposed visionary behind our brand's massive success. I noticed him watching me several times during the conversation, as if he were trying to reconcile the brilliant reports with Harper's shallow answers. Rosemary tried to intervene by changing the subject to the guest list, but the seeds of doubt had clearly been planted in Desmond's mind. I continued to work on the gala presentation while carefully hiding a series of scandalous video clips behind the main slides of the event. These files contained recordings of Harper admitting that she had used my talent to build her entire public identity from scratch. Since Harper never bothered to check the technical integrity of the files, she had no idea that her downfall was being programmed into her glory. I felt a sense of calm determination as I realized that the truth would finally be revealed in front of the people they were trying to impress. My sister was so busy enjoying her stolen wealth that she didn't notice the digital trap I was setting for the night of her birthday. The $15,000 she took was the final price I was willing to pay to buy my absolute freedom from their manipulation. On the morning of the big event, Rosemary brought a standard hotel staff uniform to my room and ordered me not to appear as her daughter today. My mother explained that having two daughters present would only complicate Harper's carefully crafted image as a self-made woman who built her empire alone. To ensure that Harper remained the sole star of the Aspen gala, I was forced to work as a back-of-house technical assistant. I watched in silence as Rosemary helped Harper into a designer gown that cost more than the annual salary of a regular employee. My family clearly intended to hide me in the shadows so that I could manage the complex projection systems while they enjoyed the luxury of the VIP tables. Even though I was the person who designed the entire digital experience for the night, I was treated like a shameful secret that needed to be kept away from the prestigious guests. When the Sterling family arrived at the resort later that afternoon, Harper introduced me to them as a struggling intern with a difficult background. My sister laughed as she told Desmond that the Jones family had only hired me out of pity to help me gain some basic work experience. I had to stand there in my cheap polyester uniform while the man who was supposed to be my future brother-in-law looked at me with a mixture of confusion and sympathy. Desmond seemed to recognize me from our previous business discussions, but Harper quickly interrupted any chance of us having a meaningful conversation. She deliberately handed me her empty champagne glass and ordered me to find a tray before I embarrassed her further in front of the elite crowd. Every word she spoke was designed to strip away my dignity and remind me of my supposed place at the bottom of the social ladder. The humiliation reached a peak during the pre-dinner cocktail hour when Harper accidentally splashed a bit of red wine onto her white silk shoes. She immediately let out a dramatic gasp and pointed at the floor while looking at me with a cold and demanding expression. My sister loudly commanded me to kneel down and wipe the wine stains from her footwear in front of at least a dozen high-profile guests. The surrounding crowd went silent as they watched a supposed intern being treated like a personal servant by a famous tech visionary. I felt the heat of embarrassment rising in my chest, but I remained calm as I took a cloth and lowered myself to the floor. Harper leaned down and whispered into my ear so that only I could hear her final insult. "Clean it up, Aubrey. That is the only thing a person like you can actually do well," she hissed with a smile that looked perfectly sweet to the observers. I didn't say a word as I performed the task, but I made sure that the miniature microphone hidden in my collar captured every syllable of her arrogance. While I was on the floor, I also activated the remote recording software on my tablet to document the self-satisfied comments she made about deceiving Desmond. Harper was so busy gloating about her power over me that she didn't realize she was handing me the very weapons I needed for her destruction. I stood up and walked away, without looking back, knowing that her public mask would soon be shattered by the very person she was currently stepping on. Later that evening, I was adjusting the server settings in the darkened technical booth when Desmond suddenly entered the room to escape the noise of the party. He seemed genuinely surprised to find me working with such high-level equipment and asked how an intern learned to navigate such complex digital infrastructures. I decided to drop my humble act for a moment and explained the intricate coding logic behind the visual displays that were currently lighting up the ballroom. Desmond looked at me with growing admiration as he realized that my knowledge far exceeded anything Harper had ever demonstrated during their months of engagement. He started to ask more probing questions about our company's history, but the sound of my mother's voice calling for him forced him to leave the booth. Even though our encounter was brief, I knew that the contrast between my competence and Harper's fraudulence was becoming impossible for him to ignore. 1 hour before the party officially started, Skylar, who is my best friend and a brilliant cybersecurity expert, appeared at the control area with a storage device containing the final transaction evidence. We had been working together in secret for weeks to ensure that every single lie told by the Jones family was backed up by undeniable digital proof. Skylar immediately helped me bypass the local hotel security protocols to lock down all manual override functions from the main Aspen Resort console. This meant that once the presentation began, nobody in the building would be able to shut down the screens without a master encryption key that only I possessed. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I watched the status bars turn green on my tablet, while confirming that our silent takeover of the ballroom's technology was complete. I carefully verified that the video file titled "The Truth About Harper Jones" was correctly embedded within the primary slides of my sister's keynote speech. Harper believed she was about to present a revolutionary tech roadmap to the Sterling family, but she was actually walking into a trap that would dismantle her reputation. Skylar checked the audio levels one last time to make sure that the recordings of Harper's insults and admissions of fraud would be heard clearly by everyone in the room. We worked with professional precision to hide the malicious code deep within the presentation's metadata, where no ordinary IT technician would ever think to look. She honestly thinks she is the master of this entire system, but she completely forgot who was the person who actually built it from the ground up. I said to Skylar as we finalized the deployment. While we were finishing the technical setup, Rosemary suddenly marched into the control booth with a demanding expression to perform a last-minute inspection of the slides. My mother tried to access the presentation software to ensure that Harper looked perfect, but the system repeatedly denied her entry because she didn't have the administrative password. I sat there in my staff uniform and watched her struggle with the interface while maintaining a perfectly blank expression on my face. Rosemary eventually gave up in frustration and told me to make sure everything ran smoothly because the Jones family's future was resting on this single performance. She didn't even notice the cold determination in my eyes as she walked away to join the wealthy guests who were already gathering in the main ballroom. I then took a moment to look through the private financial folder on the shared drive and discovered a series of documents that Harper had recently prepared. My sister had created a set of fraudulent ledger entries that effectively blamed me for the $15,000 deficit in our company's quarterly accounts. She was planning to use me as a legal scapegoat to cover her own excessive spending habits, just in case the Sterling family ever demanded an independent audit. This discovery was the final blow that destroyed any lingering hesitation I had about destroying her career in front of the world. Harper was not just stealing my work and my money, but she was actively attempting to ruin my entire future to protect her own vanity. The level of calculated malice in her plan was truly shocking, yet it only served to strengthen my resolve to end this toxic cycle once and for all. I looked at Skylar and gave a firm nod to indicate that we were proceeding with the original plan without any further adjustments or mercy. We had gathered enough evidence to prove my ownership of the technology while exposing the parasitic nature of my mother and sister's ambitions. I realized that by the end of this night, I would no longer be a silent shadow in the service of people who viewed me as a disposable resource. Aubrey Jones was about to reclaim her identity and her intellectual property through a digital revolution that no amount of social status could prevent. We stayed in the shadows of the tech booth while the music began to swell, and the guests took their seats for the main event of the evening. I could see Harper standing near the stage while she adjusted her expensive jewelry and practiced her fake smile for the cameras. She looked like a queen about to be crowned, but she was actually standing on a platform that I was about to pull out from under her feet. My thumb hovered over the activation button on my tablet as the lights in the ballroom began to dim for the start of the presentation. Every second of labor and every moment of humiliation I had endured over the last 6 months led to this precise moment of digital justice. In the middle of the extravagant ballroom, Harper stood confidently on the grand stage while holding the remote and smiling at the distinguished guests. She began her presentation by promising to reveal $1 million vision that would revolutionize the entire digital landscape for the Sterling Empire. My sister pressed the button to advance the first slide, but instead of her business roadmap, the massive LED screens displayed a crystal-clear video of her admitting to the fraud. The guests gasped in collective shock as they watched Harper laughing about how she had successfully manipulated Desmond into believing she was a technical genius. I remained in the shadows of the tech booth, while Skylar monitored the server logs to ensure that the playback continued without any interruption from the hotel staff. The screens quickly transitioned to a series of high-resolution images showing the emails where Harper had forged my signature to steal $15,000. Every forged document and hidden bank statement was now visible to hundreds of elite attendees who had previously admired my sister for her supposed integrity. Harper began to panic as she realized that her private crimes were being broadcasted in a continuous loop for everyone to witness. She frantically pressed the remote control in her hand, but the system remained completely unresponsive because I had already locked all manual override functions. I watched through the glass partition as her face turned pale, while she realized that the technology she claimed to own had finally turned against her. Rosemary stood up from her seat at the VIP table and tried to signal the event coordinators to shut down the power, but Skylar's encryption kept the screens active. The silence in the room was heavy and suffocating, as the evidence of Harper's parasitic behavior towards me filled the entire visual space. Desmond Sterling slowly stood up from his front row chair and looked at Harper with an expression of pure and unadulterated disgust. He realized that every romantic gesture and every professional milestone they had shared over the last 6 months was built on a foundation of theft. The man who was supposed to be her future husband now saw the Jones family as nothing more than a group of sophisticated grifters. I decided it was time to move beyond the curtains and stepped out from the darkness of the technical booth to face my family in front of the entire crowd. I was still wearing the torn silk dress from earlier that day, which served as a silent and powerful testament to Harper's physical and emotional abuse. The guests watched in awe as the struggling intern walked toward the center of the stage to stand beside the woman who had tried to erase her. Harper looked at me with a mixture of terror and rage while she tried to find a way to explain the incriminating data that was still flashing behind her. I stood tall and maintained a calm composure that contrasted sharply with my sister's visible desperation and crumbling public facade. Everything you see on the screen is something you activated with your own hand, Harper, I said, with a voice that carried clearly across the silent ballroom. I explained to the audience that the system was programmed to reveal the truth only if my sister attempted to claim my intellectual property as her own. The realization that she had triggered her own downfall by simply pressing the start button was the ultimate form of poetic justice. Rosemary tried to rush onto the stage to stop me, but the security guards who had already seen the evidence of fraud stepped in to prevent her from interfering. I felt a profound sense of relief as the weight of 6 months of slavery and humiliation was finally lifted from my shoulders in this public forum. Desmond walked toward the stage and looked at the ruined fabric of my dress before turning his back on Harper without saying a single word to her. The guests began to murmur and record the entire scene on their phones, ensuring that Harper's reputation would be permanently destroyed by the end of the night. My sister collapsed onto her knees as she finally understood that no amount of social status could save her from the consequences of her actions. Skylar gave me a small thumbs up from the booth as the final slide confirmed my legal ownership of every digital asset Harper had ever displayed. The gala that was supposed to be her greatest triumph had become the official site of her total and irreversible social execution. At 3 o'clock in the morning, the Aspen Hotel remained quiet while leaving behind nothing but the ruins of a failed marriage and a shattered digital empire. I sat in the lobby and watched as the last of the prestigious guests departed, while whispering about the scandalous revelation they had just witnessed. Desmond Sterling did not waste any time in making his final decision regarding the future of his relationship with my family. He officially canceled the engagement and immediately issued a legal notice to withdraw all current and future investments from the Jones business accounts. The Sterling family lawyers were already drafting a massive lawsuit to recover the funds they had provided under the false pretense of Harper's technical expertise. I saw the look of cold calculation in Desmond's eyes as he realized that every single promise Harper made was nothing more than a profitable lie. As the morning progressed, several major global brands released public statements announcing an immediate investigation into Harper's fraudulent activities and contract violations. These companies were now demanding heavy financial compensation for the damage her deception had caused to their corporate reputations and marketing campaigns. Rosemary and Harper were formally asked to leave the luxury resort before dawn because the management no longer wanted to be associated with such a high-profile scandal. My mother tried to argue with the front desk staff, but her influence had completely vanished the moment the truth was broadcasted on the ballroom screens. I watched from a distance as they struggled to pack their expensive designer luggage while being escorted toward the exit by hotel security. The social status they had worked so hard to steal was gone, and they were finally facing the harsh reality of their own actions. I took this opportunity to officially submit a formal demand for the $15,000 that Harper had previously stolen from my personal earnings. My lawyer, Vance, who is an expert in intellectual property and financial fraud, had already prepared the necessary paperwork to freeze Harper's remaining assets. Vance informed me that we had enough evidence to pursue criminal charges if my sister refused to return the funds, along with the interest accrued over the last few months. I felt a sense of professional satisfaction, knowing that the legal system was finally working in my favor after so much silent suffering. My sister attempted to call me several times while she was being driven away, but I redirected all her communications to my legal team's office. I was no longer willing to engage in her manipulative emotional games or listen to her desperate excuses for her betrayal. The panic in the car must have been overwhelming for Harper when she realized that her entire social media presence had been systematically dismantled. I had used my administrative privileges to revoke her access to every professional account and digital platform that I had originally built for her brand. She watched helplessly as her millions of followers were redirected to a page that explained the true origins of the technology and the scripts. Every post she had ever made was now being scrutinized by the public as a piece of stolen intellectual property rather than a stroke of genius. Harper was now just an ordinary individual with a mounting pile of legal debt and a reputation that was beyond any hope of repair. She had built her castle on a foundation of my hard work, so it was only fitting that the entire structure collapsed the moment I chose to stop supporting it. Rosemary tried to corner me near the parking lot to beg for mercy, while claiming that we were still a family despite the events of the evening. She actually had the audacity to suggest that I should take the blame for the technical glitch to save Harper's career and our family's future. I looked at her with a mixture of pity and resolve, because I realized she would never truly understand the magnitude of her own cruelty. "Do not call me your daughter or her sister ever again from this moment forward," I stated while maintaining a firm and unwavering tone of voice. "From this second on, our only remaining connection will be found within the cold and objective pages of legal documents and court proceedings." I turned my back on the woman who had sold my future for a chance at high society and walked toward the car where Skylar was waiting for me. We drove away from the resort while the first light of dawn began to touch the snowy peaks of the mountains around us. I felt a strange sense of emptiness followed by a profound wave of freedom that I had not experienced in many years. The false identity that Harper had inhabited for so long was finally dead, and I was finally ready to live my life on my own terms. I had lost a family, but I had reclaimed my name, my work, and my dignity through a difficult but necessary digital revolution. The legacy of deceit was finally over, and a new chapter of honesty and independence was beginning to take shape in my mind. 1 month later, I sat in my new sunlit office in Chicago while looking at a photo of the Aspen resort in a national newspaper featuring a headline about the Jones family scandal. The article detailed the complete collapse of their business empire and the ongoing criminal investigations into their fraudulent financial practices. I felt a strange sense of peace as I realized that the nightmare of the last 6 months was finally behind me for good. My new startup company was already gaining significant traction in the tech industry because I was finally using my real talent to build something under my own name. Skylar had joined me as a senior partner to ensure that our digital security and innovation remained at the highest possible professional standards. We were no longer working in the shadows of people who didn't understand the value of the technology we created together. The news reports confirmed that Harper and Rosemary were currently facing multiple federal investigations regarding their illegal misappropriation of funds and corporate identity theft. Every major elite circle in the United States had officially blacklisted them because high society has no room for individuals caught in such a public and shameful deception. My sister had lost her millions of followers and her prestigious engagement while my mother was left to deal with the mountain of legal debt they had accumulated. They were forced to sell our childhood home along with all their designer belongings just to cover the initial legal fees for their defense team. I heard through my lawyer that they were now living in a small rented apartment while struggling to find any form of employment in the industry they once dominated. Their late-night messages of regret and apologies went unanswered because I had no desire to revisit the toxic dynamics of my past life. I spent my afternoon finalizing a contract with a New York venture capital firm that recognized the genuine potential of my original software designs. It was incredibly refreshing to be treated as a respected visionary, rather than a disposable ghostwriter for a sibling who lacked basic technical knowledge. I enjoyed a level of absolute freedom that I had never known while growing up under Rosemary's constant pressure to remain invisible. I was no longer a ghost in the machine or a servant to the vanity of others, because I had finally claimed my rightful place in the world. The $15,000 I recovered through the legal settlement was used to provide scholarships for young women who faced similar barriers in the competitive field of technology. I wanted to ensure that my personal victory served a larger purpose beyond just my own financial recovery and professional success. The downfall of the Jones family served as a powerful reminder that liars ultimately have no sustainable place in a world that eventually demands transparency and competence. Harper had attempted to build a kingdom on a foundation of my suffering, but she forgot that a house built on lies cannot withstand the weight of the truth. I looked out the window at the busy streets of Chicago and felt a deep gratitude for the difficult journey that had led me to this moment of independence. My identity was no longer tied to the roles of a victim or a shadow, because I was finally the sole author of my own life story. The future looked bright and full of genuine possibilities that were not dependent on the approval of people who never truly loved me. As the sun began to set over the city, I closed my laptop and prepared to meet Skylar for a celebratory dinner to mark our first successful month of operations. I realized that the best revenge was not just exposing their crimes, but living a life that was completely detached from their manipulation and control. I was Aubrey Jones, a successful founder and a free woman who would never again allow her light to be dimmed by the greed of others. The legacy of the Jones family was now just a cautionary tale in a newspaper, but my legacy was just beginning to be written in the code of my own creations. I walked out of the office with a confident smile while knowing that I had earned every bit of the freedom I now possessed. Lesson: true talent cannot be stolen forever because the creator always holds the key to the system, while those who live on lies will eventually be consumed by the darkness they created.